In this video, we're going to be taking a look at one of the most cherished, detailed accounts of Jesus appearing after his resurrection to some of his followers. We're going to be in Luke chapter 24. Well, what's taking place early on in the chapter? Well, the women have gone to the tomb to anoint Jesus' body. And when they arrive, they find that the tomb is empty. So they're excited, and they run back to Jesus' 11 remaining closest disciples. Judas Iscariot is now gone. But they also give these reports to Jesus' other followers as well. Now, two of these other followers are walking towards Emmaus when we pick up the narrative. This is a story that is typically read a week after Easter Sunday. However, as you read in Luke 24, the walk to Emmaus takes place on Easter Sunday. What I want to do is I want to read to you the first part of the walk to Emmaus. And what I want you to do is close your eyes. Close your eyes and just listen to me read the story. I'm going to provide minimal commentary along the way, but just trust that your imagination can help you see, envision what was going on that first Easter Sunday, almost like you're sitting inside of a cinema and you're watching this on the big screen. Now I'm going to pick up reading in Luke chapter 24, verse 13. Listen carefully. And behold, two of them were going that very day to a village named Emmaus, which was about 7 miles from Jerusalem. And they were talking with each other about all these things which had taken place. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself approached and began traveling with them. But their eyes were prevented from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What are these words that you are exchanging with one another as you are walking?" And they stood still, looking sad. One of them, named Cleopas, answered and said to him, "Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem and unaware of the things which have happened here in these days?" You can sense the sarcasm in his voice. It's like, what rock have you been hiding under, man? I mean, this is the biggest news story, and you've missed it? Jesus has something to say. Verse 19, and he said to them, "What things?" And they said to him, "The things about Jesus, the Nazarene, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word in the sight of God and all people, and how the chief priests and our rulers delivered him to the sentence of death and crucified him. But we were hoping that it was he who was going to redeem Israel." Notice the past tense there. They're no longer hoping. Indeed, besides all this, it is the third day since these things happened. But also some women among us amazed us when they were at the tomb early in the morning and did not find his body. They came saying that they had also seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just exactly as the women also had said, but him they did not see. These two disciples are experiencing a myriad of different emotions. For one, they're sad. Jesus Christ has just been unjustly put to death. They're also disappointed. They speak of these high hopes they had for Jesus, that he was going to be the one to redeem Israel, meaning that Jesus would have such a huge place in Israel's history, that he would be the one who would finally restore the nation of Israel into a proper standing with the Lord. He was going to be the one to fix Israel's problems. But in addition to that, these men are experiencing bewilderment. They speak of followers of Jesus finding the tomb empty. They're not sure what to make of this. I mean, how can the body of Jesus not be where it was buried? But there's also a feeling of uncertainty in the air as well. Hey, we're followers of Jesus Christ. They believe he's dead. So now it's like, well, what do we do? What's the new normal look like now that the center of our lives is gone? It's a very difficult time. It's difficult for us to put ourselves in the shoes of these first followers of Jesus Christ. Why? We're Easter people. We know that he is risen. Of course, they were Easter people as well. They just didn't know it at that point. It's difficult for me to think of an event as important as that can help us appreciate how they were feeling. I can't do it, but I'll try to think of something at least analogous to the range of different emotions that they were feeling that we might be able to relate to. And what first comes to my mind is April of 2020, the early days of this COVID-19 pandemic. Yes, there was sadness. You turn on the news and you hear about more and more people getting infected, but also people dying, particularly those early reports about what was going on in Italy. It was very sad to read about it. Fear was a huge, pervasive emotion. Okay, I remember watching the news and thinking in those early days, I wouldn't be surprised if 25% of every single person I knew was going to get infected with this virus. And I was fearful that 10% of those infected would actually die. I can even remember making the decision to continue to meet as a church. I mean, obviously not indoors. We went outdoors and we did the whole social distancing thing for safety. But I had some family who flipped out. I mean, they absolutely flipped out. They couldn't believe that I would consider doing that. And they were thinking, you know what, there's a good chance you can die from this. Thank God they were wrong. We've since learned a lot more about it. But there was this incredible fear that just gripped people. I mean, I was pretty fearful and concerned myself. There was another emotion that popped up, bewilderment. It was a novel virus. Nobody necessarily knew what to do. We didn't have a playbook for the virus. Again, it was a novel virus. It's like, should we wear masks or not? Do they really work? What about lockdowns? There were different opinions on lockdowns. Some felt like, you know what, they don't actually work. And others were like, no, we absolutely have to have a lockdown. And then many people agreed that social distancing was a great idea in light of the fact that this is an airborne virus. But how far do we stay away from each other? Again, nobody really knew. We were really confused regarding what we should actually do. But there was also this sense of uncertainty. Remember that phrase, at least here in America, that got repeated over and over again, the new normal. The new normal. This sense that we're never going to be able to go back to the way things were pre-pandemic. Or if we do, it's so far distant that don't even think about it now. We're stuck into this thing. And it's just a real sense of uncertainty. Like, I don't know what to do. You take all those emotions and how disorienting and troublesome they were, you can at least begin to feel a little bit of just how uncertain life was for these earliest disciples. Jesus has been patiently listening to these discouraged disciples, and you might expect him to respond with a tender pastoral word. But in actual fact, metaphorically speaking, what does he do? He pops them upside the back of the head. He shows them some tough love in the form of a rebuke.
And he said to them, O foolish men, and slow of heart to believe, in all that the prophets have spoken, was it not necessary for the Christ to suffer these things, and to enter into his glory? Then beginning with Moses and with all the prophets, he explained to them the things concerning himself in all the scriptures.
Why was Jesus so upset?
Good question. Jesus is frustrated with these two disciples because they have not believed. They have not understood the Old Testament prophetic witness. Had they focused on it, had they believed it, had they trusted in it, they would not have been caught off guard by the suffering that Jesus Christ sustained. And Jesus sees this as a teaching opportunity. And so he works his way through the Old Testament law and the prophets. And he helps these two disciples understand how he, as Jesus Christ, fits in to the Old Testament. Now keep in mind, they still think that he's just a random stranger who's teaching them along the way. Jesus has not revealed yet that it is in fact Jesus Christ that they are speaking to, that is actually speaking with them. Let's continue. Verse 28, and they approached the village where they were going, and he acted as though he were going farther. Now, these men want to show Jesus some hospitality. They're touched by what Jesus has taught, probably. But they urged him, saying, stay with us, for it is getting toward evening, and the day is now nearly over. So he went in to stay with them. When he had reclined at the table with them, he took the bread, blessed it, and breaking it, he began giving it to them. Now, I find this interesting that even though Jesus is the guest, he is acting as if he is the host. Verse 31, then their eyes were opened and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. They said to one another, were not our hearts burning within us while he was speaking to us on the road, while he was explaining the scriptures to us? And they got up that very hour and returned to Jerusalem, and found gathered together the 11 and those who were with them, saying, the Lord has really risen and has appeared to Simon. They began to relate their experiences on the road and how he was recognized by them in the breaking of the bread.
Does this have anything to do with us today?
Yes, I believe that the Walk to Emmaus story has tremendous relevance for us today. You could look at this in multiple ways. I think the obvious place in terms of relevance to start is to consider the Easter message. He is risen. He is risen indeed. Jesus isn't dead. Death could not hold him. He is still living today. And because of that, we have hope. For us Christians, we have put our trust in Jesus Christ. We have put our trust in also what he has accomplished on our behalf on the cross, his sacrificial work. He's paid our sin debt. We are reconciled to God the Father through Jesus Christ. This is wonderful, wonderful news. However, the relevance of the Walk to Emmaus story is not exhausted in the Easter message. We can also look at the Emmaus story in terms of what it says to us about God's activity in our lives. If you talk to anyone who's been a Christian for quite some time, they'll tell you that there are ebbs and flows in our walk with Christ. We'll go through some seasons in which we sense a very close, intimate connection with Jesus Christ. It is as if we can sense him right in the middle of our lives and in our circumstances, and we can detect his activity. It is incredibly exhilarating to sense the presence of the divine, of God in the flesh, right there with us. I mean, it's just the greatest feeling in the world to sense the movement of the Holy Spirit. But if you talk to these same people, they'll also tell you that there are seasons as well. Sometimes they're very long, in which we don't sense God's presence in any way. We look around for even the faintest trace or hint of Him doing something, and we just simply cannot detect it. It can be very discouraging. It's often described as a wilderness time, or a sense or a season of dryness. Those of you who know me and know my testimony know that I went through 13 uninterrupted years of this wilderness experience. At one point, I mean, I just gave up hope that it could ever get any better, that I would sense God's presence. But I just kept moving forward in faith. That's all that I could really do. But God was merciful, and He pulled me out of that after my vocal cord surgery. Let me assure you that God's activity, His work in our lives and in our presence, has absolutely nothing to do with whether or not we can sense it or feel it. God is sovereign, and He's going to do whatever He wants to do. Yes, it would be fantastic if we could always sense and feel at a very deep level the presence of the Lord. But we can't. But again, that has nothing to do with whether He is working or not. I mean, let's go back to the story. We have these two followers of Jesus Christ. They've probably spent countless evenings sharing meals with Jesus Christ. They probably heard His teaching an incredible amount of times, seen Him cast out so many different demons that they wouldn't be able to count, okay? And yet, they're completely oblivious to the presence of Jesus Christ. He's ministering to them mile after mile on this walk. He's listening to them share their heartache. Then He lovingly rebukes them, and then He begins to minister to them with the Scripture. But only when they break bread together does Jesus reveal that it's actually Him. And yet He was ministering to them the whole time. It reminds me of a story that we find in the Old Testament by that arch scoundrel, Jacob, okay? He is running for his life. He's fearful that his older twin Esau is going to take his life. Now, at that point in the narrative, I defy anybody to find any biblical evidence that Jacob was seeking the Lord, that he was seeking the God of his father Isaac and the God of his grandfather Abraham. There's no evidence of it. But God was concerned. God was right there with him. And when Jacob is on his way to a distant land and he lays down for the night, the Lord gives him a dream. And he wakes up in the morning and he says, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it." God was there, working, even though he was oblivious to it. And you know what? It's that way in our lives as well. We have to trust that God is at work, whether we can sense it or not. God is sovereign. He's going to do His thing. Let's relax. Let's relax. Let's walk by faith rather than by sight, rather than by feelings, and trust the Lord. Just be faithful and leave it up to Him when He wants to reveal to us what He's up to in His presence. He is faithful. Trust Him. God bless you. Hope this brings you some encouragement.